Fix on the Sports Match is being brought to you by the Piccalilli Inn, your best pick for South Jersey's best wings. Route 206 in Shamong, New Jersey. I'm Mike Gill. Sports Match is live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Download the app. Message us your fantasy football questions through the app or hit us up on the text board 609-403-0973 if you have a fantasy football question for today's fantasy football segment. Our season begins today. Sky Guasco, the Candlestick Kids is the podcast, the Believe Podcast Network. The guys do a great job breaking down fantasy football. So, if you have a fantasy football question for Sky, send it in now, 609-403-0973. We'll try to fit in as many listener questions as we can, or use the free mobile app and hit the Message Us button, and I will ask Sky your questions on today's Fantasy Fix. Skyler, what's going on, man?
Hey, great to be here, Mike. Really excited to have you on, man. How are you?
Yeah, I am doing well. The fantasy football season is back, and I know our listeners love it. We've been doing this segment for a lot of years, and you jumping in is going to be great this year. You guys do a great job with the Candlestick Kids podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, so our listeners will be firing questions your way. But first, I got questions for you for our listeners to help out. You ready?
Bring it.
All right, man. Let's go with this. Your advice for the Saquon Barkley owners. What are we doing with him in week one?
I am trying to move away from him, and I know nobody wants to hear that. But unfortunately, I would rather have him go off on my bench in fantasy if I can. Going up against a Denver defense, much improved. Bradley Chubb's back. Von Miller, of course. I'm worried about Daniel Jones moving the ball consistently in general. Is Kenny Golladay healthy to move that ball? And Saquon's just not 100%, no matter how you slice it. I'm nervous about that. The problem is, Mike, too many people drafted Saquon Barkley in the first round. Maybe you got lucky and he fell into the second round. You have draft capital on a stud like Saquon Barkley. It's hard to move off of him. But I just encourage people, this is a weekly game. You can bench Saquon this week. If he goes off and he's incredible, then you know what? You're set, ready to go, surefire the rest of the season. If he doesn't, though, you're going to feel a lot better about it. I think he's going to be on a pitch count. I would rather go with a guy like Raheem Mostert, for example, over Saquon Barkley. I know it sounds crazy to say, but we look at matchups. Raheem against the Lions, love it. Saquon at 80% maybe against Denver, no thank you.
Okay. if I have a Saquon Barkley, I avoided him. I just didn't know what to do with him. All right, let's go to another one.
Me too.
What about the Raiders? Waller is a guy that I thought about early. If I have him, Derek Carr, how are you handling your Raiders?
The Raiders, I think, honestly, it's going to be tough here. Monday Night Football. The Raiders somehow end up squeezing in that Monday night opener every single season. I'm not sure how they do that quietly, but they're going up against the Baltimore Ravens here, who we know, forever, even a down year for the Ravens is still top half of the league here. I'm concerned overall about the Raiders, but Darren Waller, again, a top 3 tight end, usually the number 2 tight end drafted off the board sometimes in the second or third round. That's heavy draft capital to move away from. You have to start Darren Waller. He's your guy in all formats. Derek Carr, I think, is only playable in super flex leagues or a league that you play 2 quarterbacks in. Against the Raiders, I think the Ravens will be going up early, and the Raiders will have to play catch-up, which is good because garbage time in fantasy football matters. The problem is, I think that could also lead to turnovers, and maybe mishaps more so than big plays because the Ravens are so stout. Also, the Ravens are going to run the clock out, draining the clock. I'm worried about that. I'll add another Raider in here that a lot of people are going to want to start. Josh Jacobs is another player I have not drafted one single time all summer. I've been telling our listeners on the TCK, the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, to stay away from him. I've been picking up Kenyon Drake in still. Unfortunately, I won't get into all the numbers for sake of time here, Mike, but believe me, the efficiency for Josh Jacobs is just not there. He was in the top 10 running backs last year because of touchdowns and because of volume. Kenyon Drake is just as effective on limited work, and I'm worried about game script. Josh Jacobs, 21 fantasy points in wins, 10 in losses. If they're behind, he's going to get game scripted out. All Kenyon Drake, I'm worried about it.
Yep, had him last year, avoided him this year. Skyler Guasco from the Candlestick Kids fantasy football podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. All right, here's a big one. What are you doing with Kyle Pitts?
Oh, well, oh, man. So here's another thing. If you drafted him as your tight end 1, you're playing him this week. And I am just crossing my fingers that Atlanta, which I think they will do this eventually, whether it's week 1, week 6, I just think he's the second option in that offense, period, ahead of Mike Davis even. So it's Calvin Ridley, of course.
Yep.
Then I think it's going to be Kyle Pitts. And then, of course, the run game is going to go with Mike Davis. And Wayne Gallman is somebody nobody talks about, but he's also going to be in the mix as well. Russell Gage is not going to be able to compete. Zacchaeus is not going to be able to compete with Kyle Pitts. He is a quote-unquote tight end on paper, but they still have Hayden Hurst, which I think everybody forgets. Hayden Hurst, I think, will be the traditional tight end to start. Kyle Pitts is going to play in line every once in a while, but I think he's going to be in the slot quite a bit as well, which is just no chance for Philadelphia linebackers in the slot corner. You got to bring up a strong safety. Then Calvin Ridley burns you over the top. If you drop everybody back, Mike Davis is going to grind you to death. I think it's Kyle Pitts is worth a start. Philadelphia is a plus matchup, but you cross your fingers because you're hoping he's not the quintessential rookie tight end. Obviously, he's not pedigree-wise, but I think he has a chance to have, 7, 8, 9 targets, 6 catches, 60-plus receptions, and a touchdown. That would make him a top 6 tight end this week.
All right, couple more before we get to our listener questions, and then Skyler's got a couple plays that he likes this week, couple of sleepers, waiver wire. I'm interested in what to do with Kamara and the Saints offense now with Jameis Winston.
Alvin Kamara, you have to play Alvin Kamara. We talk about Saquon Barkley as a great top-end running back that I'm trying to move off of, but there are circumstances around Saquon that I'm nervous about. Alvin Kamara should get 30 touches in this game, and if he doesn't, Sean Payton's not paying attention. And Sean Payton is one of the best coaches in the NFL. That will happen. Jameis Winston, I've been saying this all summer too. I think we're going to see a Jameis Winston we've never seen before. Not Florida State, not with the Buccaneers. Sean Payton is not going to put up with, run and gun and just chucking it 50 yards and 30 interceptions. That's not going to happen. It'll be Taysom Hill before we know it. I think there's going to be a lot of checkdowns. There's going to be a lot of running. They just released Latavius Murray, which is a surprise to me. You mentioned I'm going to bring up some sleepers. I will, but spoiler alert, Tony Jones Jr., who is now the backup to Alvin Kamara, is a sleeper in deeper leagues. For PPR, certainly a handcuff worth rostering. You play Alvin Kamara for sure. Marquez Callaway, I think, is the number one, ahead of Traquan Smith, even if it's not that way on the depth chart. We saw a big game, 2 touchdowns, 104 yards with Jameis Winston just a couple weeks ago. I like Marquez Callaway as a wide receiver 3. I'm sticking away from Traquan Smith right now. And again, Adam Troutman, if he's healthy, maybe you start him, but Juwan Johnson's probably going to get work too, so I might want to stay away from those tight ends too. But I'm good with Jameis if you're in a stuck position. 2 quarterback leagues, Alvin Kamara you have to play, and I'm okay firing up Marquez Callaway as a flex or a wide receiver 3 as well.
All right, those are a couple storylines. Sky Guasco is with us from the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. You can get it on the Believe Podcast Network. They've got plenty more to listen to for Week 1, but these are some listener questions that we've been getting throughout our conversation here. And if you have more, 609-403-0973, or hit the message us button on the free mobile app. All right, Mark wants to know A.J. Brown or Antonio Brown. Who you got?
Oh, you got to go A.J. Brown, but I do love Antonio Brown. And, A.B. tonight, I have a hunch A.B. tonight is going to have the best fantasy performance of maybe all 6 incredible wide receivers here. I think he outpaces Chris Godwin coming in a bit banged up. Mike Evans is volume and touchdown dependent. Tom Brady wants Antonio Brown to succeed. I think he's going to feed him early, catch a touchdown. But A.J. Brown's A.J. Brown. Going up against the Cardinals, you got to fire him up. I love Julio Jones too, but I got to ride with. If it's one or the other, ride A.J. Brown. But if you can squeeze A.B. in there as a flex, I would do that as well.
All right, running back, Mostert or David Montgomery?
Man, it depends on format here. And for listeners, and in the future, when I come on, coming forward here, it would be helpful to me if you all would let Mike know what format you're working with, right? So are you working with PPR? Are you working with non-PPR, half, single quarterback, super flex? all of those kind of nerd terms really help me understand better where everybody's at. So if you can let him know it matters. The reason I say that is if you're in a PPR format, I've got to lean David Montgomery. It's a very, very tough matchup against the Rams. We know that. But I think because of that, there's going to be a lot of dump-offs. And he is a good pass catcher. Tariq Cohen's nowhere to be found right now on the PUP list. I like David Montgomery, but I got to say, if you're in a half PPR or non-PPR, Raheem Mostert could be a top 10 running back this week against the Lions. My only concern with Raheem Mostert is that he dominates so much, and I'm being serious, he dominates so much in the first half that they give Trey Sermon some work to see what he's about in the second half. Because the Lions are dreadful against the run. The 49ers are one of the best in the NFL. They just had over 200 rushing yards in their last preseason game against the Raiders. The Lions aren't any better. Raheem Mostert could dominate so much that they take him out late. He also doesn't catch the ball very often, although he can. In PPR, I would go David Montgomery. Any other format, Raheem Mostert.
Okay, now PPR, see, they're listening to you already. PPR
great,
flex. Antonio Brown, Noah Fant, or Henry Ruggs need help there. Need one.
Antonio Brown. I just gave a big case for him. Henry Ruggs, I want to see. The answer is Antonio Brown. Henry Ruggs, I want to see, and I actually have a hunch Bryan Edwards might actually be the best all-around wide receiver this year for the Raiders, and you got Hunter Renfrow as well. John Brown is in the mix too. So Henry Ruggs, I'm going to fade just to wait and see, but keep him on your bench. Noah Fant, just too many mouths to feed in that Broncos offense. Pat Shurmur wants to run and run often, keep the Giants off the field. I think they're going to feed both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. Andy, he hasn't played since week 2 with the leg injury. A little bit worried about that. I'm going to stick with my man AB on this one.
All right, last one. If we didn't get to your question today, we will certainly try to do more next week. All right, Sky, we got Austin Ekeler, who's got a hamstring problem, or James Robinson.
Oh, man, I was really hoping we were going to avoid the Austin Ekeler conversation here because – and here's just the reality. I'll be straight with you, Mike. I'll be straight with your listeners. I don't want to say I don't know because it's a cop-out. Unfortunately, because it's Thursday and we don't play until Sunday, that's the answer. It's the answer,
all
unfortunately.
Right, with that then, let me get you a different one then, all right? Okay. Gus Edwards, Jamal Williams.
That's a great one. I'm going to lean Gus Edwards because he's the starter for now, but I just recorded a podcast that you can listen to on the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast of my most managed teams and players. The players that I drafted the most in my personal leagues, out of 8 leagues, who I drafted the most, Jamal Williams and Tyler Boyd were drafted in 5 of my 8 leagues. They're the most of all players in the NFL. I love Jamal Williams. Looks like DeAndre Swift is going to be able to go, though. So because Jamal Williams will be that 1B this week at least, with Swift giving it a shot, I lean Gus Edwards. But moving – and, look, the 49ers are very stout up front as well. So I lean Gus Edwards here. But if you're PPR, you might want to look at Jamal Williams. Right. But, again, with DeAndre Swift in there, it's going to be tough.
So PPR, Jamal Williams or Kareem Hunt?
That's a great one. That is a great one. I'm going to go – man – I got them basically back-to-back here. And, again, if DeAndre Swift plays, I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt. Right. Kareem Hunt, first, it's that quote-unquote revenge game, they like to call it, right, going up against the Chiefs, although, you know, he didn't exactly leave on good terms, we'll put it that way. But Kareem Hunt is going to play. Nick Chubb is going to be run often, but Kareem Hunt still is very effective in the pass game. And to go back, because I don't want to leave it hanging here, I'm just going to eliminate if Austin Ekeler plays, you play him. If he's banged up at all, comes in at all questionable, go with James Robinson. Houston is horrendous. Play James Robinson, maybe regardless. But if Eckler's in there, it's hard to sit him. But going up against Washington football team, I might move off of Ekeler anyway. James Robinson is a great comp, so I might do that. But Kareem Hunt, to answer your other question, over Jamal Williams. Although, again, I love Jamal Williams moving forward.
Sky Guasco is from the Candlestick Kids. He's going to be doing the fantasy segment this year. All right, this is the quick segment here. You got about 45 seconds. Give us some of your favorite plays, a couple sleeper waiver wire guys. The floor is yours.
You got it. We just mentioned Jamal Williams. Go pick him up if he's available or trade for him cheap while you can right now. Raheem Mostert. Everybody wants Trey Sermon. Go get Raheem Mostert and start him this week if you possibly can as well. Jameis Winston is a quarterback. I'd like to throw in there if I can. Watch out for Sam Darnold this week, going up against his old team, the Jets. I think he's going to surprise this week as well. And, of course, Ryan Fitzpatrick going up against the Chargers, looking to sling it. Couple quick wide receivers, and we'll get out of here. If you're looking down the list here quite a bit, again, I love my man Tyler Boyd going up against the Vikings. And I also really like Jerry Jeudy going up against the Giants. And, of course, Antonio Brown going up against the Cowboys this evening. And then look out for Marvin Jones Jr. also, who I think is that number one for Jacksonville, going up against a dreadful Houston defense.
All right, there we go. Sky Guasco, the Candlestick Kids podcast. Check out 10 things to monitor for week 1 and any last-minute fantasy football ads. You can get that at the Believe Podcast Network. And he will be joining us for the Fantasy Fix all season long. Sky, great debut, man.
Thanks, Mike. We'll be back next week.